Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 132, not 131, as I have just found out.
Take two.
Peek behind the curtain, guys. We're not perfect. Episode 132 of Radio Gore-fam. I am Phil. With me, as always, is my wonderful co-host, Sarah. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Can't get rid of me.
Yeah. Just the eternal co-host.
Yep. Stuck with me, I'm afraid. I'm doing all right. It's cooled down a little bit. I'm not dying of heat stroke like last episode, so things are looking up. Everything's coming up Millhouse.
We clocked 40 degrees in this office last week.
Yuck.
I was like, oh my God, I'm melting right now.
Yuck. Yeah, it was, I think we got to 41 in my office, but we had to turn all of the machinery off because it was just getting a little bit silly. And then we didn't go into work on Tuesday because fuck that noise. How are you, Phil?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm a bit brain melty. It's been a week of stuff going on. We've had the heat wave. I had some crazy overtime on Thursday in which I was working late into the night. I had my cat spayed and then she had a hernia. So she's been in hospital today in the vets, but she's back home and safe. So it's been a week. It's been a week, Sarah.
I'm sad that you are learning the downsides to cat parenting. But I'm very glad she's doing okay. That's awesome.
Yeah. She had a checkup and everyone fell in love with her, and she's back home safe. So
good. I'm quite excited about this show.
Yeah, me too, actually. I wasn't sure what to expect because I've only seen this film once before, and I don't remember it being particularly... I don't remember having a lot to say about it.
Okay, that's interesting because until we talked about it... Well, we're doing The Faculty. Let's just get that out of the way. I mean, everyone knows. I don't know...
Hang on. Guys, we're doing The Faculty. And now you've had the intro. Now we can carry on.
I feel like that
you have no idea how impossible it would be to edit that in had I not done that.
I don't. That's not my job. Not my problem. That's a problem for future Philip. Interestingly, until we talked about it after the last mini-sode, I had no idea that the only time you'd watched this is when I made you. Mm-hmm. That was news to me because I don't remember that at all. It must have been a long time ago.
It was a while ago. I couldn't tell you when it was, but it's definitely been 4 or 5 years.
Oh, wow. I was going to say longer than that.
Yeah, well, I like the concept of time has just vanished. So.
Yeah, meaningless. Okay. So this was a second watch.
Longer. Mm-hmm.
This was about maybe like a 30-second watch. Embarrassingly. No, not embarrassingly. Fuck it. Why am I like being ageist? I'm old enough to have seen this in the cinema. Mm-hmm. I think I was 15 when this came out. So
to be fair, so was I. I just wouldn't have necessarily been abiding by the cinema rules.
Wait, how old are you? You would not have been allowed to go see this in 1998.
That's my point. I could have gone. I just wouldn't have been abiding by the cinema rules.
No one would have let you in.
I would have been 12.
Tiny
11.
Prepubescent Phil. 1 ticket, please. No. Yeah, so I watched this when I was 15, and I don't know if it's because of the age I was at, or if it's because this film is like the most late 90s distilled down into 90 minutes that it really hit a sweet spot for me at the time, and I became somewhat obsessed with it. It's probably one of the oldest DVDs that I own. I definitely owned it on VHS before I had the DVD though.
That's dedication. I love it.
Yeah, I watched it a lot, man. I think just something about it spoke to me. That blend of sci-fi horror, that kind of somewhat alternative, although somewhat cringe these days, soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is there anything more 90s than just opening with the Dimension Films logo to the sound of The Offspring? The kids aren't all right. Jesus.
It is a bit of a time capsule, isn't it?
Very much so. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I have a synopsis. It's quite long. Strap in.
It's right. It's good for padding. It's fine.
Get comfortable, guys. So, it's also, I should point out, it's really fucking cringy. Like, I get
sounds great. I'm excited.
Second-hand embarrassment from this synopsis. So, this hip and edgy thriller from the director of From Dusk Till Dawn and the writer of Scream and Scream 2 sizzles with a hot young cast, including, I can't even keep a straight face, including Elijah Wood, Josh Hartnett. Oh, full stop. Wait, what? A hot young cast including Elijah Wood, comma, Josh Hartnett, full stop. What? Who wrote this?
It's because it's too hip for proper grammar, Sarah.
Oh, it must be. When some very creepy things start happening around school, the kids at Harrington High make a chilling discovery that confirms their worst suspicions. Their teachers really are from another planet. As mind-controlling parasites rapidly begin spreading from the faculties to the students' bodies, I see what they did there. It's ultimately up to the few who are left, an unlikely collection of loners, leaders, nerds, and jocks, to save the world from alien domination. Also starring Robert Patrick, Famke Janssen, and Jon Stewart in a great cast. Don't miss the chilling excitement of this unpredictably smart, full-on, scary hit. That definitely felt like somebody had been given a word count to hit.
Yeah. Also starring the entire cast.
Yeah. Comma, full stop. That was not tremendously well written, but somewhat accurate.
I mean, it's enough. It's enough to gauge what the film is about, and what more can you ask for from a synopsis, really?
Oh, many things. But I fear I would be asking far too much in this instance. So, where do we start, man? I mean, so first off, would you consider this horror or sci-fi?
Ooh.
If you could only pick one.
I would say horror.
Oh, interesting. I would say sci-fi.
Interesting. Okay. Interesting.
Our first disagreement of the show.
Huh. What would explain yourself?
No.
I will not take questions now.
I refuse. I don't know, man. I think it's not very gory. I don't find it to be very tense. To me, they lean far more heavily on the sci-fi than on the horror. But that's just my opinion. That's my take.
To me, my instinct was to say that the crux of the film wasn't exclusively sci-fi. Like, you could do something similar with, like, Possession or something similar.
But just it's not Possession, it's Body Snatchers.
No, I know. No, I know. And it's probably, like, I'm feeling very stupid by describing what I'm talking about.
You're just trying to desperately justify your position now that you've said it.
Probably.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Also interesting, I find, is I don't know whether maybe this is one of the reasons that this film resonated with me so much in 1998, but there was a 1993 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, if I remember rightly, just called Body Snatchers. And nobody ever talks about it anymore, and I don't know why, but it's another one that I rented on VHS quite a lot and was somewhat obsessed with.
Okay.
It was directed by Abel Ferrara, who did obviously like Driller Killer and Ms. 45, and like directed quite well, if I remember rightly. Although I'm going to have to find a copy and rewatch it. It might be terrible. But also, if memory serves, Larry Cohen and Stuart Gordon both did rewrites or like drafts of the script.
Okay.
So it's interesting to me that, like, when I think of Body Snatchers, the 1993 film, I think of it as being in a completely different time period, when actually there's only 5 years between the two films. And I don't know if that's perhaps, I don't know, this like parallel thinking thing that happens in Hollywood where, you get sort of two quite similar properties in development at the same time.
Like the Menace.
Or, Armageddon, Deep Impact, Ants in a Bug's Life. It happens so frequently. So I don't know if that was the case or if just, I don't know, maybe there was a fear of sort of indoctrination or something similar in the 90s. I don't know. I found that quite interesting, though.
Well, it's interesting you should say that because I was looking into Masters of Puppet. What was Puppet Masters? There we go. Metallica.
Puppets of Masters.
I couldn't for the life of me remember what it's called. Remember what it was called.
Oh, good Lord.
It's going to be a mess. And it was
Puppet Masters. Huh?
Mr. Puppets.
Yes.
And it was kind of a reaction to the kind of Red Scare that was going on in the 50s.
Okay.
The idea of like the evil within, the kind of threat within that was the kind of communist Russian
infiltration
invasion going on.
Interesting.
So that idea of like a threat seeping into society has been running through that kind of story, and they obviously name check Invasion of the Body Snatchers and the Puppet Masters in this film, and so
they're very unsubtle about it.
Yes, that is very true.
But I guess that was just sort of their way of. I mean, it was Kevin Williamson again, wasn't it? So, 2 years after Scream, I believe Kevin Williamson was actually supposed to direct.
Yes.
The script, if I remember rightly, the script was not his. He was brought in to do rewrites, effectively, to kind of make it more, as the cover says, hip and edgy. Because, off the back of Dawson's Creek, he was so good at, like, accurate teen speak. That wasn't exaggeration at all, was it? But yeah, the original plan was for him to direct as well, which I believe he turned down in favour of directing Teaching Mrs. Tingle, which I have seen and remember nothing about. So perhaps he should have directed this.
Because I was leading into Teasing Mr. Tickle. And I'm not sure that sounds right. So I'm glad you're the one that said the name of that and not me.
Surely Mr. Tickle would be the one doing the teasing. No?
Fair point.
But yeah, so it went to Robert Rodriguez, which was an interesting choice, I have to say.
Okay.
I think, anyway. I think this is easily the least Rodriguez-y film in his CV. Are you familiar with much of his other stuff?
Not a lot.
Well, I mean,
know he did Dusk Till Dawn.
He did From Dusk Till Dawn. Prior to that, he did he did the trilogy. There was El Mariachi, Desperado, and Once Upon a Time in Mexico, I think.
Okay.
And El Mariachi, if I remember rightly, I should probably have written notes, shouldn't I? Not just rely on my memory for this. But yeah, if I remember rightly, he made it for about $7,000. He was kind of like a real big proponent of the no-budget filmmaking around that time. And in the same way that Kevin Smith financed Clerks by kind of selling his comic collection and maxing out a bunch of credit cards, Robert Rodriguez, in order to fund El Mariachi, basically sold his body to medical science.
Oh.
Like medical research, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't have any more details than that. I wish I did.
About to say. It seems apt, though. It seems very apt.
I mean, you would hope it'd just be something more innocuous, like sleep trials or something, rather than he's missing fingers for science. Who knows? I don't want more than $7,000 for that, just saying.
Thanks.
But yeah, so in 1998, he had, obviously with From Dusk Till Dawn, definitely made his mark at that point. And the studio, which we will talk about, the studio kind of were hoping that after the success of Scream that lightning would strike twice. Basically, they were hoping this would be their new Scream, and it definitely failed to perform nearly as well at the box office.
Yeah,
and I don't know why that is, but you can go on.
No, I was going to say, I mean, for not to discredit it, I don't think the script is quite as clever. It's self-referential.
Trying.
Yes, yeah, I mean, yeah, oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, yes, it's self-referential. Yes, it mentions kind of nods to other horror movies, but kind of there's a real sense in Scream of taking the tropes and
dismantling them.
Of slashers and dismantling them.
Yeah,
and there's kind of that going on in Faculty. You know, you've got Josh Hartnett's character, who it turns out is a secret genius. You've got Elijah Wood's character, who
with the worst haircut I've ever seen on a human. Can we just say what was going on there? Awful, just awful. Was that a thing in the late 90s? I don't remember.
Don't ask me. You've got Elijah Wood's character, who, you know, it turns out is actually not sporty, but can run. You know,
when chased.
Physically fit, you know, and he's meant to be the kind of nerdy outcast. And so there is some sort of dismantling going on, but not nearly to the extent in which Scream does it, you know.
I would definitely say it bends to the tropes far more than Scream did. But it definitely has a meta feel about it. I just don't think it's quite as successful in pulling it off.
Yeah. I think the fact that Scream had horror fans in it allowed it to explore the tropes a lot more obviously, I suppose, or a lot more kind of
I guess so, but
distinctly.
But in this, you literally have Stokely being the kind of sci-fi nerd who is essentially the one who figures everything out. So she is to the Faculty what Jamie Kennedy was to Scream.
Yeah, that's true.
So in some ways, it was actually quite a lazy reproduction. Oh no, am I going to dislike this film by the end? I hope not. There's always the danger, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so going back to the beginning, when I see that Dimension Films logo, oof, that sends a bit of a shiver. Like, once upon a time, that was like exciting. Oh, what's this going to be? Is it going to be a Scream, or is it going to be a Phantoms? Oof, we'll never know. And now it's just, oh God, sex pest. And it kept happening throughout this film.
Oh no.
Because obviously Dimension Films, and then the film kind of opens a few scenes in, it's like, oh no, Danny Masterson. And then a few more scenes go by, oh no, Harry Knowles.
Oh no.
This film is chock full of sex pests. So I'll be honest, this watch was a little bit marred for me.
Yeah.
With the knowledge that we now have. Which is really sad, because I used to watch it and go, Harry Knowles, film nerd. And now I'm just like, oh, gross. It's really sad, isn't it? We've talked about this a lot, about how films are a collaborative effort, and I will never let the actions of one or two people cloud my support of something much bigger than them. But it definitely makes it harder.
Yeah, well, for sure. Like, particularly if it's unexpected, I think. Like you say, if you'd have, if they were big enough characters that you'd kind of known, you could kind of go in and at least expect to be encountering them. But then if they're kind of bit parts, if they're cameos or minor parts, whatever, then it kind of blindsides you, and you go, oh, yeah, okay, that's the thing now. You know, you've got to kind of reconcile that with your love for the movie.
Yeah. And I know, like, Rodriguez worked with the Weinsteins more than once, if I recall, and was like good pals with Harry Knowles. So it's sort of, my brain is doing the thing where it's just like, oh no, is he a scumbag too? Birds of a feather, man. I don't know. I know nothing about Rodriguez, so I'm not here to cast aspersions, but it does sort of, it's really difficult not to focus on that stuff sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
I was still able to enjoy the film, though, don't get me wrong. But I think that's worth pointing out.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It is interesting you mentioned earlier about the idea of like this being a snapshot of the late 90s, because that's the note I got. It's kind of, if you had a film that like distilled the late 90s down, it's this one, right?
Absolutely.
Apparently, both Sarah Michelle Gellar and Charisma Carpenter were in talks to play parts as well. So
I heard that. I mean, I know Charisma Carpenter was up for the role of Delilah.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to sound rude when I say this, but was she not already a little bit too old for her role in Buffy? Was she 30 in Buffy?
Probably.
I feel like, I don't know, I feel like maybe they were skewed a little bit older. Because like Elijah Wood...
I think that's such a 90s thing anyway, right?
I guess so. But I think sort of paired next to somebody like Elijah Wood, who is such a perpetual baby face, that would have looked really glaringly odd. I can't imagine who Butterfingers.
Excuse me.
I can't imagine who Sarah Michelle Gellar would have been playing unless it was also Delilah.
That's the thing I was subtly trying to look up on my phone.
I see.
When I dropped it.
Not so subtle after all.
I know. Interesting though, because I've been aware of Jordana Brewster for a little while. Didn't know this was her debut film.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, I kind of expected. I think it's one of those. Again, she's one of those actresses that I feel kind of exists in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I kind of expected her to have had a presence before.
Yeah, like when I picture her, I only ever picture her wearing sort of camisole tops and very low-rise jeans. Mm-hmm. She's just stuck in that time period as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So this was like, what, 3 years before the first Fast and the Furious? 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, probably around that.
Because that's what I always remember her from. For better or worse, I guess. That's interesting. How do you feel about the rest of the cast? Because it is quite the ensemble.
Oh, for sure. I was surprised. I don't remember noticing that as much during the first watch. But yeah, I mean, you know, Clea Duvall, you've got Josh Hartnett, Elijah Wood.
I love Clea Duvall.
I knew you'd say, you were just waiting for me to mention her, weren't you?
I love her, honestly. When I was 15, she was the coolest person I'd ever seen. I just wanted so badly to be Stokely.
That's exactly how she acted the character. Well, she just kind of thought back to her 15-year-old self and played the character like that.
I want to be friends with Clea Duvall. How can we facilitate this? And Elijah Wood.
Yes,
somebody hook me up, please.
But no, I think I was quite impressed. I think I could never quite buy Famke Janssen as a diminutive, shy,
I don't know what you mean.
Type.
With the curly hair and the glasses, she's disgusting, Phil. I could barely bring myself to look at her, and then after the She's All That makeover, stunning. But prior to that, ugh.
I don't know what it is. I think she's just got a very her presence screams kind of very strong and...
Well, yeah, she was a fucking Bond girl.
Yeah, and she was Jean Grey and...
It was definitely somewhat odd casting.
Maybe it is just association.
On that note, though, I do really despise that trope of just, like, She's All That, for example. Rachel Lee Cook, adorable, gorgeous. But, oh no, put some glasses on her. Oh, how can anyone bear to look at her? She's so disgusting.
Well, like America Ferrera in Ugly Betty, that whole show is based on the premise of, hey, look, glasses and braces are ugly.
I hate it. It's so weird and Hollywood, and it's so dumb. We're better than that.
We are now. I mean, this was, a good 24 years ago now.
We were better than that then.
Okay.
Some of us were better than that then. As a girl with curly hair and glasses, I take serious offence to this trope.
Sure. I mean, I've got glasses. That's enough. I can at least partially identify.
Yeah. But what about the cast of, well, the faculty? I mean, it's really easy to focus on the teenagers in inverted quotes. But yeah, I think the cast of the teachers is really interesting as well. A couple of really big genre names in there.
Oh, for sure. And they play in that, with the reference of Terminator.
Oh, him running down the
chasing
corridor.
after the Principal Drake.
And also, I didn't realise until this viewing that Jon Stewart's character, who's probably my favourite teacher in this, actually, love him, his character name is Professor Edward Furlong.
Yeah.
Which I would hazard a guess is the only time the word professor will ever preface Edward Furlong.
I think it's a safe bet, unless unless you're talking about a different Edward Furlong.
I guess so. Piper Laurie, Margaret White. Mm-hmm. She still scares the shit out of me. Which is odd, but
really solid.
I always associate her with her character from Carrie, because that's another one that I watched to death when I was a teenager. But actually, I rewatched Return to Oz recently, and I'd forgotten she was in that as well, and she was
really
quite lovely.
Huh.
So I have unfairly maligned her in my head. But yeah, she was great. Bebe Neuwirth, who you don't really see anymore, but she was quite big for a while in that kind of time period. Daniel von Bargen, R.I.P.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Did you hear about him? It's very sad.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, he... oh, gosh, I hope I don't get this story wrong. He shot himself in the face.
Oh, okay.
But survived. He tried to commit suicide and survived, and then died later from some sort of complications. But yeah, very, very sad. Because he wasn't very old. And if I remember rightly, it wasn't too long after this, because he was kind of really popular around this time. He was in a bunch of stuff. He was in this. I think a lot of people know him from Malcolm in the Middle. So like predominantly comedy actor, if I remember rightly. So yeah, very sad.
That's very sad, yeah.
Yeah. Salma Hayek, also disgusting. How dare she not wear makeup? Ugh. Honestly.
And she's got a cold all the time. She must be horrendous.
Sniffly. Oh no. Oh man, this film.
It's great. Like I do that because I think that it's not just the fact that it's a snapshot, but it's the fact that so few actors have in this film have actually made a career past that sort of time period.
What do you mean?
Well, like, you look at a lot of these, they're so kind of entrenched in the late 90s, early 2000s. I can't really think of many of these actors that have had much of a career past that era. And maybe it's just my lack of film knowledge, but...
The older actors, do you mean?
Just generally, I think. Like, Elijah Wood obviously had Lord of the Rings and kind of... But he's kind of retired from acting. He's got more, at least focusing more on directing. Josh Hartnett, I always associate with that time period.
He kind of stepped away after Penny Dreadful, if I remember rightly. And there is a reason why, but I forget.
Okay.
I did read an article. Laura Harris, I don't remember seeing her in anything beyond Severance. Who
like
else?
Claire Duvall, again, was some really big things of the time, but...
But she's directing now, though.
Yeah.
So they're all still in the game.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's just, I think it's just it seems like...
Sean Hatosi's somewhat disappeared. I'll give you that.
Maybe it's just my association with the films they were in and when those films were released. But I'm more focusing on that rather than... Because again, Claire Duvall, like, she was in The Grudge, which was kind of early 2000s as well.
Yeah. I hated that film. I remember very little about that. I think the older cast are still kicking.
You're probably right.
Everybody, it's just a safe bet that everybody's doing superhero shit these days, because obviously Salma Hayek was in Eternals, Robert Patrick was in Peacemaker.
Was he? Okay.
Yeah, he was John Cena's dad.
Maybe it's just the fact that I've managed to completely avoid every single media that these people have been in since by mistake.
I think no, I agree. I agree with you for a lot of them. I would say about half the cast kind of peaked in the early 2000s, which is a shame because everybody, I would say everybody in this certainly showed promise, with the exception of Usher, who should stick to music. That's my professional opinion.
That's fair.
As someone with ears.
That makes you qualified enough, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
One of the things I really loved about this film is how like big Goosebumps vibes it gives me.
Okay.
Like, I know it's a bit older because it's high school rather than kind of like kind of mid-teens, mid-younger teens that R.L. Stein used to kind of write for. But the whole like bunch of outcasts in a city, in a school, you can't trust the adults anymore, like the use of archetypes, even just the plot of like, I mean, it's a classic plot. It's Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Like the teachers are possessed now. It screamed that kind of like R.L. Stein vibe, or Stephen King, which they do name check, but I kind of, maybe it's the fact that it takes place in a school that made me think it was more, that reminded me more of R.L. Stein than Stephen King.
I can see that. It's not something that had occurred to me, but I can definitely see that. And I think you're right as well, with the focus being on, I mean, the title kind of gives it away, but the focus being on the teachers being the ones that are being assimilated into this alien race. It's a very childhood fear. Because obviously we wouldn't be scared of teachers. I'm nearly 40, I don't give a shit. But it does speak to a certain age group, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can't, obviously, as young people and kids and all sorts, you're supposed to turn to adults as the responsible ones. And
or like any authority figures.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, if you can't do that, then what do you do,
Go and snort something that Josh Hartnett cooked up in his garage, I guess.
Caffeine tablets, apparently.
I mean, dude, I can't take Pro Plus because I would be bouncing off the walls. So I'm not very proficient in drug culture as it is. But I would hazard a guess, if I were to snort that much of a crushed up caffeine pill, that would probably have some strange effects on me.
Yeah, I would say the same.
I would also, obviously we're skipping quite far ahead at this point, but I would like to dedicate the show to Oscar the Mouse. R.I.P.
Sad times.
Very. That made me genuinely upset.
That doesn't surprise me.
Such a cutie. I remember really enjoying the pace of this film. And it struck me again. Like, I don't know, maybe this is harsh. I don't necessarily think the direction in this is noteworthy or outstanding in any way. It's very good. It's, it's competent, don't get me wrong. There are some decent little flourishes here and there. But my God, the editing, it's such a pacey film. I remember
and it's a little
that.
longer. It's actually an hour and 44 minutes.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it.
No.
So snappy. Like, there's not a minute wasted. So I would definitely give them that. I remember sitting down on this watch and just being like, God, this is flying by. And I so rarely think that.
I think it helps that actually the characters are really engaging.
Yeah.
I think, like I said, they do, because of the fact you realise pretty quickly that these characters kind of have hidden depths, like I said, particularly with someone like Josh Hartnett's character, Zeke, being actually a smart guy, but just lazy.
Secret Bill Nye.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of keeps you guessing. And I think had they not done that, it would have been very easy to just kind of switch off and let the film happen to you rather than actually paying attention to it. And that's, to me, what would keep me engaged with it and let it kind of feel pacey, because I was constantly engaged with it.
I've just thought of yet another film that came out in that time period. It's just occurred to me, I haven't seen it in about 20 years, but there was a film called Disturbing Behaviour that also came out in 1998 and basically has a very, I don't want to say similar synopsis, but like there's definitely a kind of body snatchers thing, like pod people element, and there's like a new kid and the alternative kids and they're just trying to figure it all out. And yeah, it's so weird. I cannot believe I forgot that film existed, but there must have been some kind of groupthink going on, surely. That's crazy. Late 90s, man. Everyone was scared of being assimilated into an alien race.
I couldn't even tell you what that was in reference to, though, you know?
No, because there's usually like a veiled reference to something in real life, isn't there? But what was happening in the mid to late 90s?
Like, I would understand if it was technology, because obviously the proliferation of the internet, the millennium bug, like there's a lot of kind of fear of that in that era of communication and technology.
Yeah, and that was definitely represented in film and TV as well. Like a lot of Ghost in the Machine type stuff was around at that time. Yeah.
But I wouldn't say this really lent into that at all.
Interesting. How strange. Another notable thing I find about this film is the soundtrack. We have to talk about the soundtrack. It really does set the scene for what you're about to watch when you hear The Offspring blasting over those opening credits.
I was as soon as I picked up on that, I started paying attention to the song choices, and while they're really good, they are so on the nose.
They really are. School's out. Come on.
School's out. Another brick in the wall. The kids aren't all right. But not only that, the end credits ends playing underneath Oasis's "Stay Young." It's like,
that's my least favourite part is when it ends, because I fucking hate Oasis.
It's like that. It's the fact that they've gone throughout the entire movie. It's like, adolescence is terrible, school's awful, this is the worst, and then ends with, "Hey guys, stay young."
Well, because it's fine. They defeated everything.
On the nose, guys. All good. Learn some subtlety.
Yeah.
Subtext is for cowards.
It definitely beats you over the head with the themes. I did notice that. Interestingly, School's Out was a cover. It wasn't Alice Cooper. I want to say it was Soul Asylum.
Okay. Another Brick in the Wall was a cover as well. Yeah.
I don't know, maybe that was a budgetary thing, or maybe that was part of how it was hip and edgy.
Well, I mean, again, Soul Asylum probably is, again, associated with that era, right?
Oh, yeah. And definitely more people watching that film would have heard of Soul Asylum than they would have done Pink Floyd or Alice Cooper.
Tragic.
I know, right? But yeah, it did make me smile because one of the guys, like the two tweakers, there's Danny Masterson, and then there's the other guy who always go to Zeke for the weird pen drug crap. And the other guy, I want to say he's called Wiley Wiggins, which is,
I hope you're right, because that's the best name.
It's the cutest name of all time. But he hasn't done very much, if I remember rightly, but he was one of the main characters in Dazed and Confused, which was another film that I was obsessed with around the same time. And Alice Cooper's School's Out features really, really prominently in that. So I wondered if that was like a little connection as well.
You are correct, by the way. His name is Wiley Wiggins.
Good work, brain.
Good memory.
I mean, it's not a very forgettable name, is it? Wiley Wiggins.
Fair. And also, I'm
a huge fan of alliteration as well.
Stan Lee name.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I mean, I definitely appreciated the soundtrack a lot more in 1998, is what I will say. I don't want to rag on it too much, because it really is such a product of its time.
Yeah, for sure.
But I definitely don't get a great deal out of the soundtrack these days.
Speaking of the well, not the soundtrack per se, but the score. I was quite surprised.
Okay. It's the same guy who did Scream.
I think you're right, yeah. But it didn't, like, I enjoyed it. I really liked it, but it didn't, there was something about it that didn't really feel like this sort of movie.
No, there was some music at one point, and me and Dan were watching it together, and he was just like, fuck, that sounds like it's just out of Aliens.
Oh, really?
So I suspect there was some heavy influence involved.
So to me, it was kind of towards the start, I think there was like a heavy use of a glockenspiel or something like that. And I was like, is
glockenspiel.
Like... Yeah, well, there was. I'm pretty sure there was.
That's such a good word. It just
evoked like Tim Burton and Danny Elfman, you know, that kind of like dark fantasy thing.
Okay.
Again, I enjoyed. I think it was. It's always nice hearing a proper like orchestrated score rather than kind of spooky ambiences.
Yeah, or just nothing but Soul Asylum.
God, can you imagine?
Nobody wants that in 1998 or at any other time.
But yeah, I did enjoy it.
I got a lot of the score as well, actually. It's not quite as memorable as Scream. And I wouldn't necessarily have picked up on the fact that it was the same person. You know, like, there were a lot of really popular composers, like Hans Zimmer, for example. You can usually spot a Hans Zimmer score if you know what to listen for.
Yeah, for sure. Same with Danny Elfman, same with John Williams.
Definitely Danny Elfman, yeah. Lorne Balfe. Like, there are commonalities throughout their work.
Philip Glass.
Generally, yeah. Whereas I would not have necessarily heard any sort of similarity between those two. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. And I'm sure he's scored a lot of other stuff that's been wildly different. So
I'd need to check. It's one of those things where I'm not quite familiar enough with his work in order to piece together whether there's a common theme running through his work, you know?
Yeah, I think you're right, though. This felt a little bit more out of left field. But I will use it to back up my theory that I believe this is more sci-fi than horror. Score 1 for Sarah.
I mean, so would you say the same thing about The Thing? I mean, I presume you would.
It's interesting you say that because this film, it wasn't until, I don't know, whenever I last rewatched this film, so a few years ago, it hadn't really occurred to me. And embarrassing because The Thing is probably my all-time number one favourite film ever.
Yeah.
It borrows so much. And not just the obvious stuff. Like, obviously, thematically, it's very similar. The whole paranoia element is the same. And then you've got the really on-the-nose stuff, like the scene where they are sort of encouraging everybody to do the drugs. You know, it's the same as the blood in the petri dishes. Yeah. Famke Janssen's character literally is like instead of being a spider head, it's like tentacle head, but same fucking thing. There are so many nods. And I don't know. I don't want to be too critical because I do still love this movie. But instead of kind of getting a kick out of it, it made me kind of go, obvious. Yeah, I don't know why. Maybe it was the mood I watched it in, but instead of kind of being like, oh, they're referencing a film I like, it was just like, oh, so lazy. And I don't know why. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm being mean. I did somewhat get a kick out of it, I guess. But I think much like any reference like that in a horror film, I think if it's a property you're super, super familiar with, then the homage will seem very, very obvious. Whereas if you've just got like a passing interest or a passing knowledge, you might get more out of it because you'll be like, that's like this film.
And I guess it particularly dependent on how heavily they lean on it as well. Obviously, with this one, you've got a bunch of people who are questioning each other's identity, and they're trapped in a room and they're doing a test to work out who's, like, everything about that scene is, you know, one for one kind of similarity to The Thing. And it's kind of, you can draw on it, in certain elements, and that would be
Yeah.
a nice nod. But to lift the entire thing and use it as a facsimile just comes across as a bit naff, I think.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I feel like I have to keep justifying this or clarifying. I do still like this film.
For sure.
But you can kind of pick out all of the influences. And I know a lot of people have called it like The Thing meets The Breakfast Club, or Invasion of the Body Snatchers meets Scream. And it's all of those things, but you can literally like pluck each one. And if you remove all of that stuff, I don't think you'd be left with a great deal, which is quite sad.
Yeah, I suppose that's the risk of making a film that leans so heavily on references to other films, because it becomes more about the references than actually having any substance of its own.
Yeah.
Interesting though, because could you say that maybe that's what the parasites are doing? They're assimilating other people, and I'm sure there's something there that I can't quite grasp at the moment.
Are you suggesting this film is assimilating other films to become one giant film?
Exactly. And it's losing sense of self in the process.
So you might be onto something.
It's a work of genius, Sarah.
I don't know if I credit Kevin Williamson as being any sort of genius. He struck gold with Scream. Dawson's Creek was obviously very popular. It's aged very poorly.
Oh, I'm sure. I've never seen it, but I'm sure it has.
Right. So speaking of aged poorly, here we go.
Okay.
I would like to talk about the effects work.
I was waiting for you to bring that up.
Were you? It's almost like you know me. So, again, to draw a parallel to The Thing, much like The Thing prequel, it feels like they had some really, really solid practical effects. And then some CGI that just made everything look really shonky by comparison. It was crazy because, I mean, we've not talked a great deal about kind of the story progression like we normally do. But I imagine everybody's very familiar with this film at this point. But the alien queen at the end of the film, I think is quite a feat of practical effects work. It looks great. It's a verging on sweaty puppet, but I'll let it slide. But it looks cool. And then you've got moments where it's just like Jon Stewart's fingers running away and it looks garbage. And I don't know. There has to have been a way. I just feel like either keep the CGI to such a minimum that you don't notice, or do everything practically. Because if they had the capability and the budget to construct that alien queen, there is no fucking way they couldn't have done a few fingers running away on a linoleum floor. Refuse to believe it.
Addams Family style.
Anything. That would have looked better. Yeah. Do you know what I mean, though? I think the two side by side, I think that the practical effects were so good it makes the CGI look worse.
Yeah.
If that's possible. And I know a lot of people talk about the fact that the effects work in this film does look super dated and really bad. But in all honesty, I remember it looking a bit crappy when it came out. I don't know if it's necessarily aged or it just wasn't good to begin with.
Yeah, it's hard to know, isn't it? Without kind of seeing it in context. I did appreciate the actual animation. I know we've spoken about this before, but it's very easy to go, the VFX are bad, but
yeah,
VFX themselves, there's so many different kind of elements to it that all need to work in tandem for it to succeed. And if one of them fails, the whole thing looks janky. But to me, I remember enjoying the actual animation of the creatures.
Okay.
But that's not to say...
When you say when you say the animation of the creatures, do you mean kind of the very small, like the thing that Elijah Wood's character finds on the field and then becomes, what's the word? I was going to say animated, but then we said animated a bunch and I didn't want to be repetitive, but there isn't a better word. When it's dropped into the fish tank and it comes to life. There you go.
Yeah,
that looks pretty cool. In isolation, I think Clea Duvall's character puts her hand up against the tank and the tendrils sort of are drawn to her. That doesn't look quite as good. That looks a bit shaky. But in isolation, the creature itself does look good. You're right.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's... Because the thing is, like, I would imagine... I've never animated them, but I would imagine animating a fish is a lot easier than animating tentacles. Because the thing is, tentacles move in such a weird way. Like, I know... what film was it? Was it Finding Dory, I think? Like, Pixar worked so hard to work out how octopus tentacles moved and to replicate them well enough for the film.
Okay.
And, like, we've all seen a fish move, whether it's in a fish, like a pet store or at home or at the sea, in rivers, just on nature program. Like, there's so much reference material for that it's a lot easier to animate something wiggling through the water than it is to try and work out how imagine how these tendrils will move, because it's such a alien, there's nothing to base it on, right? Or there's very little to
alien
yes.
An extraterrestrial? I don't know. I can't help you.
But I can see why that would perhaps be, that would certainly explain the discrepancy.
Okay.
So yeah.
I can see that. I mean, you're in a far better position to talk about this stuff than I am. I'm just like, effects bad. Sarah,
I
not
feel
like.
I need to fight my corner a little.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to hear it. I genuinely am, because I know very little about that side of things. It's a real blind spot for me. I know what looks good. I know what doesn't look good, and that's about the long and short of it.
But the thing is as well. I mean, we're moving a bit away from the film now, but
as we all want to do, when VFX look bad, they're very noticeable. When they look good, you probably don't even notice they are special effects, and so it's so easy to go, all VFX are bad, because when they look good, you don't even notice they are VFX. That's fair. I know Game of Thrones is a really good example, because obviously a dragon isn't real, but you're not stopping to think about all the shit in the background and the huge number of crowds. And I think there's a part of our brains. Yeah, there's a part of our brains that's just like, that's a lot of people. And you don't really think about the logistics of it and go, oh, they're probably not there. Because it looks seamless and it's in the background. And that, to me, is like when CGI is used best.
Yeah, for sure. I think the
dragons were good too, though.
They were. I think it's just one of those things, again, like, because even if it's done practically, we all know dragons don't exist. And yes, there's a tangibility to them, but there's, it's fake because dragons don't exist. And
how dare you?
I'm sorry, Sarah. And I can't remember where I was going with that.
No, I think that's a good place to wrap up that train of thought anyway. And I agree. And it is nice to get an alternative perspective, because I can get a bit negative, I suppose. But I mean, it's a movie. It didn't necessarily pull me out of it. Yeah. But I did definitely make a mental note of, seen better.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to talk about. I think the tone of the film helps as well, because yes, it's kind of a horror sci-fi. However, it doesn't take itself too seriously. I think there's a vein of kind of, not comedy, but there's a vein of humor running through it.
Yeah, okay, maybe comedy's overselling it, but yes, it's definitely intentionally humorous in places.
I wouldn't call it a comedy horror, for example, but there is certainly the sense that there's a bit of fun throughout, and I think that really, with those sort of things, you can kind of forgive a bit of janky CGI because of the fact that it's not super deadly serious,
No, and it was clearly never intended to be like Oscar bait or any, it's not an awardsy film, is it? And I think it kind of, although the studio had hoped for more, I think it's definitely a film that knows what it is and kind of does a really good job of staying in that wheelhouse and embracing it. And reluctantly, I will admit that Kevin Williamson's script has a big part in that.
Yeah.
That was hard to say.
You feeling okay?
I'm fine. I'll get past it. I do. There's a part of me that really just hates that kind of all-knowing teen speak. Like, I don't know grown-ups that talk that way. And they know so much. Their pop culture reference just is enormous. And I don't believe, I guess they're supposed to be like, between 16 and 18, something like that.
High
17
school ranges.
Yeah, I don't know, 12. Who knows? But nobody talks like that. And it's forgivable again because it's a movie, it's a sci-fi, it's supposed to be reasonably far removed. But it does bug me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I guess it's nothing. I suppose basically Diablo Cody kind of took the torch from Kevin Williamson, didn't she? Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why I have an issue with her films as well.
And poured kerosene on it.
Yeah, I think I've just had a really big realization of why I'm the only person in the world who doesn't like Jennifer's body. She's the female Kevin Williamson. Oh no.
That explains a lot.
It does. This is like therapy. I'm enjoying this.
You're welcome.
Have you got much else that you want to talk about?
Not a huge amount. I did appreciate the cool, veiny special effects.
Yeah, they
were a
weren't
lot
too
more
bad.
successful.
They weren't too bad. There were some cool shots as well. I will say that for considering I made a reference earlier to the fact that I don't think this was like outstandingly well directed. There are some really fucking cool shots. Like the one that springs to mind immediately is Robert Patrick, his character at the football game, and there's just kind of fireworks going off behind him, and he turns down and he turns around and he has that menacing sort of half smile and just that fucking grin that only he can do. It's such a cool shot.
Yeah,
I'm such a sucker for that.
He's just kind of standing in the sprinklers and that reminds me, that point, there's a particular point where I can't remember the character's name, but she's trying to get Elijah Wood's character's attention and is just repeating his name.
Yeah,
and
then I can't remember her name. It's Piper Laurie.
Yes, yeah. And then there's like this kind of crash zoom edit thing they do, and to no effect, like nothing happens. She just gets a bit louder, and that snaps him out of it. And again, it's just those sort of things where they just have a bit of fun with it that I really enjoyed.
There are some definitely neat little flourishes that are very well suited to the project. Which, I mean, considering I said it's not a very Rodriguez film, I don't know, there are some Rodriguez-isms about it, I suppose, but it kind of feels like he's on a Dimension Films leash, if that makes sense. Like he's being reined in a little bit, perhaps.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So, I have a question. And I don't know if you'll be able to answer me because you might not be able to remember your first viewing of this very well. Did you second guess it? Because a lot of people find this quite predictable. I mean, I guess in that it references so many other things and we've seen this story played out before. But specifically, they second guessed who the Queen was.
I don't remember, but I can see why people... I mean, they basically acknowledge it in that kind of... in the blood test scene, right?
Which bugs me. She didn't... You know the flashback where she's like... She knocks the bottom off the thing and like blocks off it. That didn't happen.
You were looking, weren't you?
It didn't fucking happen. It didn't. I was looking. It didn't happen. I hate that bit. You can't retcon your own movie. I saw it. I was there.
Maybe it was an unreliable narrator thing, Sarah.
Maybe.
But yeah, they kind of say, "Oh, well, you're new. It all happened when you joined." And
there's so much foreshadowing.
Yeah, and from then on, it's. I think it's probably very easy to discredit all the other characters or most of the other characters.
Okay.
I don't know. I for films like this that don't take themselves too seriously, I try not to second guess them too much because I just enjoy the ride rather than Because if it's a film that's trying to be clever, trying to play with your expectations and
it's not Knives Out.
Then like I'm also like trying to work it out myself before the film sort of tells me. But this film, like, I'm not discrediting it. I don't think I'm not trying to do it a disservice. I think it's an enjoyable movie, and I do think it's smarter than other films of its genre.
Yeah, I will agree with that.
I just don't think it's the type of film where I want to be ahead of the game and try and work it out before it's revealed, you know?
Yeah. And I think you're right when you called it a ride. It's definitely quite a ride, I would say. It doesn't have the same impact on me that it did when I was 15. My tastes have changed a little bit. However, I think this is always going to be like, I don't know, it's edged into that category of film where I would give it like a very strong 3.5 out of 5. Because it's definitely hugely flawed, but I could stick this on in the background as a comfort movie at any point and still have a blast with it.
It's always weird. It's always weird when you've got those sort of films because, again, we've talked about it so much, but it's that conflict between the film's actual quality versus how much you enjoy the film, you know?
Well, I think objectively it's a 3.5 out of 5.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe I'm on my own there. Maybe critically it wasn't that well received. I'm not sure. But I think there's a lot about it that's quite accomplished. And it's fucking fun, man. That's what the movies are all about. I love subversive cinema. I love to be challenged. But ultimately, I just want to have fun. And I think this film delivers it in spades.
No, for sure. For sure, no, I agree. I remember when I was watching it, just having loads of fun. Because again, you know, maybe it's the use of archetypes, maybe it's the use of kind of drawing on other kind of other sources.
The stock characters are very Breakfast Club. Yeah.
but the whole thing feels very comfortable, very familiar. I've only seen this film twice, but there's something about it that feels more familiar than it should.
It's comfy. It's a very comfy film. However, I will say my biggest criticism to wrap up on, I don't care for the ending.
Oh, well, like everyone lives happily ever after?
I really don't like the 1 month later. Everything after that screen, I can disregard. I love that Elijah Wood is one of the very few final boys in our little genre. I couldn't count 5. I couldn't count on one hand a number of final boys. So that was really cool. I do love the references. I love so much about it. But I really don't care for that saccharine sweet ending where everybody's just like, they've all got their happy ending, you know?
Yeah.
It bugs me. It's so like, it sort of swerves straight from, as the cover says, edgy, teen kind of horror thriller, straight into, back to Dawson's Creek. I don't want that. I don't need that. And I hate, it's a crime that not only was Clea Duvall's character straight in this, was actually not a lesbian. I'm mad about that. But it's a crime that they literally Ali Sheedied her by the end. It's like, oh, she's fine now. She's wearing pastels. Fuck off. Bring back Goth Stokely. She was way better.
No, I think it kind of reeks of a studio interference move. It's like, oh, we need to make sure these characters are happy now. We've had their relationships teased. We need to know. And it's like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Like the film was about the aliens. That's wrapped up. Because I actually thought it was really clever. The choice to have Elijah Wood's character be infected in the last moments of the Queen dying, and then showing that the parasites had just died, because
it's a neat way of showing that the whole thing worked without having to oversell it.
Actually show that everyone recovering. And I kind of hope that it actually ended on that, because again, it's one of those things. It's a neat shorthand, and it shows a level of thought has been put into the portrayal, because it negates the need to have the characters come back. But like you say, they just do. And it does make me wonder whether it was a studio move, because
I think you're probably correct there. I did read quite a lot of trivia for this film, and it did seem like there was quite a bit of studio interference. And we all know how much Harvey Weinstein likes to interfere with things.
Oh,
Sorry,
no.
that was a very off-colour joke. Is it too soon? He's disgusting, and he's still behind bars, right?
Yeah.
Please, God, tell me he's still behind bars. Thank God. I'm making light of things because I'm still mad that so many films that came out in the 90s are marred by his involvement. It pisses me off. Not to mention the incredible volume of victims. What a scumbag. But yeah, I get the impression
there is sorry to interrupt.
No.
There is like a through line, because obviously Elijah Wood went on to do Lord of the Rings. I'm pretty sure there is a monster, I can't remember what it is, but there's a particular creature in Lord of the Rings that was specifically modelled after Harvey Weinstein.
Really?
I think so. I think I remember reading that.
Was it just Harvey Weinstein? Because he looks quite monstrous already.
Yeah, they singled him out and made like a caricature of him as like an orc or something.
Oh my God.
I feel like
and that's
confirmed this.
Geez, that's going back a long time, which goes to show how much of an open secret it must have been.
Yeah.
That's gross. So he strikes me as the sort of person who might be, or is likely to be, quite a control freak in all other aspects of his life as well. So yeah, I suspect probably some studio interference, but I think it would be perfectly acceptable to just turn this film off 4 minutes before the credits roll and pretend that that's the end. And then you also don't have to listen to Oasis. Win-win.
Double win. I mean, It doesn't bring anything more. It doesn't bring anything to the table that you kind of don't already suspect anyway.
Yeah, you can make that assumption. We can get there on our own.
Yeah, you knew there was a thing between Clay Duvall's character and I can't remember the other character's name. And
Stan?
You knew there was a thing. Sure. Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
Oh no, Stan and Stokely. I hate that. Ugh. I like alliteration, but not in that case.
Together they are Stankley.
No, maybe that's more accurate.
But you knew there was a thing between Jordana Brewster's character and Elijah Wood's character. Like, you don't need to show it, right? There's just teasing at it throughout the movie is kind of enough, because
that was enough for me.
That happens on the kind of outside of the main story. And particularly since it's an ensemble cast, well, I would be more forgiving of it if there was like a will they, won't they between two characters. But this is like the entire ensemble finds their better half, you know?
Yeah, it's awful. So rough. But ultimately, I still think it's quite a strong film. The 90s is probably my least favourite decade for horror, if I'm being honest. So this is, to me, probably one of the better ones.
Yeah, I think it was still very much in that. I think we'd kind of come out of the 80s, and there was a sense that horror wasn't really a serious genre anymore, because you had all those slashers that had made such an impact in the 70s and early 80s steadily become more silly because they felt they had to up mistakes and like do something new. And I think, then because the big names are getting sillier, everything else gets a bit sillier as well. And it wasn't kind of until Wes Craven and Scream that
New Nightmare.
Well, and New Nightmare, yes. No, we spoke about that. We did speak about that, but that wasn't until that sort of time in which horror became very self-referential and examined and sort of turned a mirror upon itself.
But
and
weirdly,
what had kind of gone wrong and why.
Yeah.
You know?
And weirdly, that's when people started taking it seriously again.
Oh no, for sure. But I think that makes sense because like with any self-reflection, you can't improve upon yourself if you're not willing to hold up a mirror and look at yourself again. You know, it's that self-reflection that allows the criticism in order to actually move on from what was wrong in the first place. Yeah,
and you can also have fun with it at the same time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, I'm not saying it's a very serious thing, but you just need it in order to,
develop.
Right.
Yeah. I agree. And that is all I have to say on The Faculty.
So 3.5 out of 5 then?
3.5, which I think is quite a strong score. I mean, that's a 7 out of 10. That's a 70% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. It's like I said, it's a very comfortable movie.
Yeah.
Kind of plays with the genre enough to keep you engaged and interested, but not particularly groundbreaking. It's kind of just in that sweet spot between not vapid and bland, but not super mind melty because it's so out there.
Yeah.
And I can really appreciate that.
Yeah. They tried something and a lot of it worked.
Yeah. That was a good choice. I'm glad we spoke about this one.
Cool. I wasn't sure how this was going to go because I didn't know if you were a fan of this or not, so that pleases me.
I didn't either. I couldn't remember. But yeah, cool. It's been a blast talking about this film. Guys, if you want to hear more of us, we have a mini-sode that's released through our Patreon. Just $2/pounds a month. And you get access to twice as much content, which is great.
Yep.
If we say so ourselves. We also have a Discord where you can come say hi.
We do say so.
We do say so, and we have said so just then, in fact.
Yes.
Find us on social media if you're not following us already. We post a bunch. You can come say hi. It's all great stuff.
Yep.
And until next time, stay spooky.
Bye, guys.